Hey folks, got a great question from viewer here. This is from Charlie B. Canon 35 f1.4L versus Canon 35 f2 versus Sigma 30mm f1.4 on a Canon T2i 550D. I'm a semi-pro photographer, i.e. I earn part of my living as a photographer. I earn the other part as a computer programmer, so I call myself semi-pro since I'm not a full-time pro photographer. I've used Sigma and Canon lenses for years. I love most of the Sigma and Canon lenses, but both brands have a few lemons among their lineup. I would agree with that. Most brands do. I do most of my work using the Sigma 30mm f1.4 old version prior to art version and Canon 50mm f1.8 in low light indoor photos that are candid photos at meetings, events, parties where flash is not allowed. I find both these lenses perform excellent in low light, indoors or outdoors. The Canon 50mm f1.8 also performs well outdoors in bright light too. I would agree with that, especially the new STM. I like that lens. Note, I had a Canon 50mm f1.4 but sold it because I like the 50mm f1.8 better. Again, I would agree with that, especially the new STM lens. I'll put the link below. They both work well in low light, but the f1.8 is better in bright light, and the f1.8 is smaller, better for candid, and lighter, easier to carry all day. Now, he's probably talking about the older Canon non-STM lens, the predecessor. I also think the f1.8 is slightly sharper than the f1.4, though not significantly. I would agree with that. I think it's the same with Nikon, too. Note, the 30mm f1.4 for the Sigma 30mm f1.4 does not do well outdoors in bright light, but I don't care about that since that's not what it's made for and not what I use it for. The Sigma 30 also has a limitation of focusing only to approximately 50 feet, but that's not a problem since shots at infinity are not what I got it for or use it for, i.e. indoor and outdoor low light photos I've done are always much closer than 50 feet. So the limitations of the Sigma 30 don't matter to me since its limitations are outside of its intended uses. Within its intended uses, it's excellent. And that's a good point. A lot of people will say, oh, this can't do that. But if that's not what you're using it for, and what you're using it for, its performance is good, that's all it should matter for anything you're using something for, like gear-wise, you know. For instance, a lens you're using for a single subject where you need it sharp in the center and you actually want to blur out the sides, it doesn't matter if the extreme corners of that lens are soft, but the center is sharp. There's no problem with that. Some people would say, well, when you use that lens, the corners aren't sharp. Well, he's making a great point here. If your intended uses, it suits your purposes, then do it. Okay. Now, I prefer Rebel T2i because it's small and light and does a good job at low light subjects. I can't disagree with that. It's an older camera, but it still makes great photos. Again, we're back to what a previous viewer had just commented on. It's the skill and knowledge of the photographer these days that is the distinguishing factor here. Any good photographer can do great photos with probably any gear in the last 10 years. You know, without probably you've been able to tell which camera it was shot with, really. My photos are usually used online and sometimes in print, but when printed, they're small enough that images that the T2i has more than enough resolution. I don't need full format and don't like heavy metal cameras since I carry and shoot for a camera for hours at a time. That's a good point. I like smaller, lighter too. A light plastic, fantastic T2i with a light lens that does good quality is all I need. Here's another thought too, just jumping in here. T2is are a dime a dozen practically. Buy a few of them and never change lenses. Put your 3 favorite primes on or your 2 favorite primes and a zoom. And never have to worry about dust and changing lenses or taking the time to change lenses. And never have to worry about if one breaks. You'll have extras. And if you drop one, you know, you'll probably be less inhibited because it's not expensive to replace. Just thinking. Above was the background. Now this paragraph contains my main point. Although I really love my 30 and 50mm lenses, the 30 is often too short and the 50 too long. If I owned a 35, I could do all my work with one lens. It'd be nice to do all my work with a 35 and not have to carry 2 lenses and not have to change lenses in the middle of a job. What about the Sigma 18 to 35 f1.8? I want to get a Canon 35mm f2 IS USM lens because I think it'd be great for low light. F2 is fine for low light because it allows enough light to autofocus to work well. And I shoot on f4 for adequate depth of field for group photos. f4 allows me to shoot 1/60th of a shutter speed when indoor lights are on. In a dimmer situation, like some parties, I can shoot at f2.8 and still have barely enough depth of field for group photos at 1/60th shutter speed. I have to stay at 1/60th because these are all candid photos. In other words, he's saying there's some subject movement. I'm sure the Canon 35 f2 IS USM would have plenty good IQ, as does the 30 f1.8 from Sigma and the Canon 50 f1.8. I would think so. Note, I'd never use the IS feature since it wouldn't help with subjects moving around, and that's true. And IS drains the battery, and that's true too. But I'd still like that 35 because of its other features like 35mm focal length and USM focus. The old Canon 35mm f2 without IS and without USM would be fine too, except its focus is too slow and way too noisy. It's embarrassing for candid photos. I would agree with that too. So just an interesting comment here as far as, that's a great option he's noting for budget setup. I mean, he's shooting with T2i's and some prime lenses. Ideally, he's saying he could get away with and be happy with shooting everything on the 35 f2, the newer one. But he's using a 30 f1.4. He finds that a little wide. Not a lot of difference there, but it just goes to show you people have their preferences. But a great suggestion, some T2i's at dirt cheap. I bet you can get those for a couple $100 used. I haven't looked them up. I'll look them up, put the link below, but I'm guessing that's what they're at. And one prime he's happy to shoot with. So it's an interesting option for a good value Canon DSLR setup. And I wouldn't have any problem. I mean, I could shoot a wedding with that, no problem. Anybody says they can't probably doesn't know their stuff well enough, because it's not the gear. A Canon T2i can take good photos. There was a time right around the Canon T2i's heyday when it was new, where it was as good or better than image quality wise than anything in the lineup. And pros shot a lot with a sensor equal or not as good as that sensor. So just goes to show you. But what do you guys think? Is that an option you'd consider for a good value budget DSLR kit? T2i? Are you the type of person that says, I can never shoot professionally with something like a T2i? Or are you the type of person that's like, yeah, you know what? Decent glass, body's capable of doing good image quality. It's the shooter, it's the chef in the kitchen, not the utensils. What do you think? Leave some comments below. Let's discuss it. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your commentary there. Thanks for taking the time to write this, detailed, thoughtful feedback, Charlie. Stay tuned. We'll be back soon here at artoftheimage.com. Oh, and I almost forgot once again, check out the Indiegogo campaign for our t-shirts. We've got Nikon and Canon. This is your brain on drugs. Kind of a fun Ford Chevy thing. You can either be really serious about that and get right into it and want it, or you can just take it tongue-in-cheek. I think they're cool t-shirts. Let me know if you want one. Get in on the Indiegogo campaign. Help us get the campaign rolling so we can get these t-shirts in print. Might make a great, fun gift for somebody, especially with Christmas coming up. Thanks, folks. Talk to you soon.